On the afternoon of December 4, 2014, a 46-year-old man was hiking on Paldal Mountain in Suwon, South Korea. It was an ordinary afternoon on an ordinary trail. Then he saw the black plastic bag. Inside it was a human torso. No arms. No legs. No head. No organs. The organs had been removed, not by the impact of death, not by the passage of time. Removed deliberately, before disposal, by whoever had put the body there. Investigators who arrived at the scene that afternoon had worked serious crimes for years. None of them had seen a body prepared this way. The woman inside the bag was 48 years old. Her name was Kim. She had gone to work and not come home. Her family had reported her missing 8 days earlier. The man who killed her was her live-in partner. He had spent those 8 days in a motel with a sex worker, using cash, staying calm, waiting to see if anyone would find what he had left on the mountain. His name was Park Chun-pung. He was 55 years old. He was a Chinese Korean national, a Joseonjok, part of the ethnic Korean community in China, who had been living in Suwon for years. And what investigators discovered about how he had planned, killed, and disposed of Kim was one of the most disturbing cases in South Korean criminal history. The torso found on Paldal Mountain on December 4, 2014 was the beginning of what became one of the most extensive crime scene searches in Suwon's history. Over the following days, investigators and forensic teams searched Paldal Mountain and the surrounding areas systematically. What they recovered, from 11 separate black plastic bags found across multiple locations, including Suwon Stream, were the dismembered remains of Kim, a 48-year-old woman of Chinese nationality who had been living in Suwon with her partner. The forensic examination of the remains established several things. Kim had been strangled, manual strangulation, consistent with an attack from behind. The cause of death was not the dismemberment. She had been killed first. The dismemberment had occurred afterward, in what forensic investigators determined had been a two-stage process conducted in two separate locations. The organ removal was the detail that distinguished this case from other dismemberment cases investigators had encountered. The organs, internal organs, removed with a degree of deliberateness that the forensic examination could establish but not fully explain, were not recovered. They were not found in any of the 11 bags. They were not found in any subsequent search. Where the organs went has never been officially confirmed. The speculation that circulated in Korean media in the weeks following the discovery, involving organ trafficking, a theory that investigators publicly discredited, reflected the specific horror that the detail produced in a public that could not otherwise account for it. The forensic picture that emerged was of a killer who had spent significant time and effort on the disposal process. This was not panic. This was not impulse. This was someone who had thought about what they needed to do and had done it. Kim had been working at a large supermarket in Suwon. She was 48 years old, a Chinese national of ethnic Korean heritage, one of the approximately 2 million Joseonjok living in South Korea, part of the labor migration that had brought Chinese Korean workers to Korea across the preceding 2 decades. She had been in a relationship with Park Chun-pung since April 2014, approximately 8 months before her death. Her sister reported her missing on December 8, 4 days after the torso was found on Paldal Mountain. She had not come home from work on November 26. She had not contacted her family. She had not appeared at work. When investigators matched the DNA from the remains to the DNA of Kim's sister, the identification was confirmed. The woman in the bags was Kim, and the man she had been living with was gone. If this history is new to you, subscribe to Unsolved East and hit like. New episodes every week. Park Chun-pung had been planning. The investigation that followed his arrest reconstructed the sequence of his actions in the weeks and days before Kim's death, a sequence that established premeditation with the kind of specificity that prosecutors in serious cases require. Before the killing, Park had rented a semi-basement room approximately 200 meters from his primary residence. He had paid a deposit, 200,000 won in advance. He had rented it under the pretense of needing additional storage space. The room was not for storage. It was for what came after the killing. On November 26, 2014, Park went to the supermarket where Kim worked. He found her. He took her, by force, by whatever means the investigation established, back to their shared residence. He strangled her there. He then moved the body to the basement room he had pre-rented. In that room, he conducted the primary stage of dismemberment. Investigators later determined that the two-stage process, the initial work in the primary residence and the more extensive work in the basement room, reflected a level of operational planning that was inconsistent with an impulsive act. He had rented the room before the killing. He had thought about where the work would happen before he did it. After completing the disposal process, Park moved the remains to Paldal Mountain and other locations across Suwon. He distributed them across 11 bags. Then he checked into a motel. He spent the following 8 days there, with a sex worker he paid with cash. He watched the news. He waited. He was calm enough, during those 8 days, to conduct his daily life in a motel room while investigators began to search for the woman he had killed. The owner of the basement room he had rented reported him missing. The deposit had been paid, the room had been rented, and the tenant had not appeared to complete the rental agreement. That report, combined with Kim's sister's missing persons complaint and the DNA match from the mountain, gave investigators what they needed. The psychiatric evaluation conducted after Park's arrest addressed the question that the evidence of planning raised most acutely. This was not a man who had lost control. The pre-rented basement room established premeditation days before the killing. The two-stage dismemberment process demonstrated sustained operational focus after the killing. The 8 days in a motel demonstrated the psychological capacity to compartmentalize, to function in ordinary daily life in the immediate aftermath of what he had done. What the evaluation could not establish with confidence was the specific motivation for the organ removal. Park's own account of this aspect of the case was not fully consistent across his statements. Investigators' official position was that the organ trafficking theory was not supported by evidence. What the evidence did support was that the removal was deliberate, that it required time and effort, and that Park had chosen to do it. Why he chose to do it has never been fully explained. That specific question remains, in the formal investigative sense, open. The investigation moved quickly once the DNA identification was confirmed. Park Chun-pung was identified as the primary suspect within days. He had no alibi for November 26 that held under scrutiny. The basement room he had rented was traced to him. His departure from the shared residence coincided with Kim's disappearance. The mobile phone records placed him in the areas where remains were disposed. But Park had disappeared. He had no fixed address beyond the shared residence. He was not using his phone in ways that generated a traceable signal. He was moving on foot, paying cash, avoiding the digital footprints that the investigation was looking for. Investigators identified a specific habit. Park had a dental condition that required regular treatment. He had been visiting a specific dental clinic in Paldalgu regularly. Investigators obtained the clinic's CCTV footage and confirmed his appearance, identifying a distinctive baseball cap with English lettering that he wore consistently. They established surveillance on the clinic. They tracked his mobile phone to a general area. On the night of December 12, 2014, 16 days after he had killed Kim, 8 days after the first remains were found, investigators caught Park Chun-pung at a motel near Suwon Station. He was with a sex worker. He was arrested at 11:30 p.m. He exercised his right to silence initially. 3 hours after his arrest, he admitted the killing, while claiming it had been accidental. He said he had pushed Kim during an argument, that she had hit her head on the wall and died. He said it was not murder. The pre-rented basement room disagreed. The court disagreed. He was convicted of murder, corpse mutilation, and corpse abandonment. The first instance court sentenced him to life imprisonment in June 2015, finding the killing to be premeditated. The second instance court upheld the sentence. The Supreme Court confirmed it in April 2016. Park Chun-pung is currently serving a life sentence. Park Chun-pung is in prison. The sentence is confirmed. The conviction is final. The legal process that the case required has been completed. What has not been completed is the accounting for what was done to Kim's body. The organs removed from her remains were never found. The explanation for why they were removed was never established to the satisfaction of investigators or the court. Park's account of this specific aspect of the case was inconsistent. The organ trafficking theory was officially discredited but never replaced with an alternative explanation that the evidence fully supported. Kim's right arm and left leg were never recovered. Her family buried what was found. The case also produced a specific legal consequence in South Korea. Park Chun-pung's case, along with other high-profile cases in the same period, contributed to a public debate about the identity disclosure regulations for criminal suspects. Under the law that applied at the time of his arrest, suspects could be publicly identified in serious cases. Park Chun-pung's face and name were released by Gyeonggi Provincial Police on December 13, 2014. The public knew who he was. What the public did not know, what the investigation established but could not fully explain, was why he had done what he had done to her body after killing her. That question is the one the court sentence did not answer. It is the one Park Chun-pung has not answered either. Kim was 48 years old. She went to work on November 26, 2014. She did not come home. Parts of her have never been found.